to feel the history of the movement, to feel like this power, and to hear thousands of people chanting and cheering and loving. It was this remarkable affirmation that every effort matters.
Hey, everybody. I am so honored and so happy to introduce Paul Katami and Jeff Zarrillo, who are not only true friends of mine, but true heroes for our community and trailblazers, without a doubt. They are husband and are known as two of the plaintiffs in the California Prop 8 case, Hollingsworth v. Perry. They played a major role in the advancement of marriage equality and LGBTQ plus rights in this country. And I really am honored to have both of you on the show. So thank you for being here.
It's awesome
Great to be here.
And congrats on the show.
Thank you. It was so funny to see you guys, the Out 100 event, after we'd already scheduled this interview. But it was a fun night, and it was just funny timing.
Yeah, they did a great job with that event, and it's as past recipients or honorees.
It's always great to see the next group of people get recognized for the contributions they make to our community. They're all very important. Let's be real. We knew you were going to be there, so we wanted to kind of get at you before the interview to make sure we sounded smart during this interview.
Well, it's so crazy because, I mean, I imagine you guys were probably honored back around the time that, around the time that the case was at its peak in 2013 or 12?
I think we were recognized in 14, though, right?
I think the case ended in 13, mid-year, June of 13. I think we were recognized in 14. Long time ago.
I was honored in 2010 as an honoree when I was 18, and it was crazy because, I know all the folks, some of the folks there at Out and the Advocate. I forgot what the current parent company is called, but I had to pull some strings to get an invite because it was like, I think it's been through about 3 or 4 owners since I was on there. So, but I did know the people there, but it's just funny because you think, it's been so long since, and I met you guys 10 or 15 years ago, I think. And I just interviewed Lance Black recently, and was talking to him about how long ago we had met, because we met, I think, when I first started getting involved when I was 18. So like in 2010, had lunch at Tender Greens. So it's like that same scene from back then when it was, it was just it was an exciting time for me being a newcomer to the whole scene. But anyway, I'll dive right in. Can you explain the case? Just like, obviously there was Proposition 8, which was on the November 2008 ballot, which banned same-sex marriage in California. It basically was on the ballot because the California Supreme Court had legalized same-sex marriage in June of that year. So in response to the California Supreme Court, they put this proposition on the ballot. I was curious what that was like for you guys, and like whether you got, I should know this if I'm being completely honest, but were you guys married during that brief window, or did you get married after or before? Like, how, give a sense of like what it was like for you guys living through that period between when it was legalized in California and then when it was banned.
We had been together at that point. We've been together. This March will be 25 years. So in 2001 to 2008, you're talking 7 years we've been together, and we had talked multiple times about legally protecting our relationship, taking the necessary steps. But we didn't even get a domestic partnership because we just felt like that was an acceptance of second-class citizenship. Mm-hmm. So we had talked about getting married, and then when the California Supreme Court came down with their decision, I mean, it was certainly an exciting time in our community about this incredible recognition that we were finally getting what we deserve. And we had talked about, do we get married? When do we get married? How exciting this would be for our family and for ourselves. And ultimately, within days, Proposition 8 was being talked about, or the ballot initiative. It hadn't been named Proposition 8 yet. And then we thought to ourselves, well, wow, could you imagine if we go through all of this and then it gets invalidated? What would that do? Or the emotional toll that would take? We didn't know that they would uphold the thousands of marriages that occurred in that window.
Just like in 2004, and it was San Francisco when I'm pretty sure they invalidated the marriages that had taken place.
Our
They did.
co-plaintiffs got a letter from the state.
Basically saying you're no longer legally married. So they went through exactly what Jeff said. And this is our conversation: is you're when someone's preparing for a wedding, it's not trivial, right? It costs emotions, it costs dollars, it costs time and effort in the best possible way. These are all investments that you make knowing that you're doing something that's going to be solid and protected. And to the thought of what if, it really was immediate for us. And then we thought, what if this does happen? What does this do to our state of equality? What does this do in terms of the mindset and the activism that would need to happen at that time? So we just didn't do it. We did, I will say, take legal action in terms of trying to protect ourselves as much as we possibly could.
Right.
In
Through
case
like
of-
legal contractual.
Yeah, correct, right.
Yeah.
But nothing even close to the idea of a celebration of marriage and
Well, I remember when the Republicans used to say, when you see candidates say, or I think maybe even in 2008, like McCain saying, I'm not opposed to same-sex couples, entering private, contractual agreements or whatever, but like without any acknowledgement of the fact that there are all sorts of other benefits, related to taxes and I mean, many other things that are different.
I mean, what a
get marriage.
convenient omission that federally you don't get 1,138, I think is the number, rights and privileges that come along with the idea of being
And just
married.
it being called a contractual,
Yeah.
it just, even a domestic partnership,
Yeah.
we appreciated the opportunity that was, even though it was limited, it just sounds like some document you're going to sign and move on. But, by, that summer, once it had made it on the ballot and the No on 8 campaign got underway, we were just getting pummeled in money, the Yes on 8 side, and predominantly funded by the Mormon Church out of Utah. They donated over $40 million to the campaign. The fact that the ballot initiative was worded the way it was, you would think if you support marriage equality, you'd vote yes. And if you didn't, you'd vote no, but it were the other way around. And then there was English as a second language issue. So it was really challenging. And I think by the time we got to Labor Day, we knew we were in trouble. We really knew that.
Also, I mean, our case did another thing. It exposed all the lies, the misrepresentations, the propaganda, frankly, the BS that was out there that people were buying because someone said it. So, I mean, that was also something in retrospect that during our case, we were like, you need to prove these things if you're going to say them. And so ultimately, as Jeff was saying, as the campaigns progressed and look, at first, it looked like Yes on 8 was going to lose, that we were going to win this protection. And then the campaigning changed. And then there were more lies and more representations, more fear-based mongering of these ideas of
Bring up children and like indoctrinating.
demonizing
those bumper stickers with everybody holding the
The
little
little
gift
hand, like
rings.
I remember
protect your
all that
family.
stuff.
The
So-
commercials out there with Gavin Newsom.
So so ultimately during all of this, we got wrapped up in this idea that if we could be married in a way that didn't have this asterisk on it, then we would look forward to that.
To be honest, as soon as I asked you if you were married during that period, I immediately had a flash in my head, and we'll get to this later, of like, I was like, duh, of course, I remember vividly. I remember that it was immediately after, and we'll get to it, but in 2013, right?
Right.
When it finally was, when Prop 8 was finally struck down, and that went into effect. It was Kamala Harris, right? Or Antonio Villaraigosa
Yeah.
who married you. Right, exactly. So
Antonio
I-
on his last day in office, and
Right.
Kamala Harris made the phone call to the registrar's office
Right.
to make sure that our license was granted to us. That's the one that played
It's so
nonstop
insane. You guys
during
were
our
like
presidential campaign.
between Gavin and Kamala, all this stuff was, and then to know what, and then now knowing what was to come. It's just anyway. We'll get to all that, but what was it like for you guys when Prop 8 passed, and what motivated, and how did the journey come between, or how did it play out between that night, election night 2008, with the mirror, I guess you could say, the two images of Obama being elected.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember for me, I remember being, elated, but then going online and looking at the, election returns in California and seeing that. I remember I burst into tears, but like for you guys, like that period between election night 2008 and then however long it was, what was the period? How long was the period between that and when you guys became plaintiffs, and how did that happen?
Well, I'll take the election, and I'll let Paul tell you how it all came to be. But I mean, we were at friend's house in Pasadena. We were all gathered. Really felt like it was going to be a great night overall. A little nervous about Prop 8, obviously, but really felt like Obama was in good shape. And then, to see America take this enormous step forward by electing our first African-American president. It was just, it just felt like the possibilities were endless. And that was certainly short-lived, because it wasn't very much longer where we started to see some of the returns for Prop 8, and we knew we were in trouble. We certainly gathered and did some protesting the next few days down at the Mormon Temple and on Santa Monica. But it was really bittersweet. Really bittersweet night.
It just cracked open, that night cracked open this idea of hope, because that was such a profound, element of the campaign, the presidential campaign. And then it broke open how hard we cope as people in the LGBTQ plus community, right? So we were like, this heaviness that you carry with, and then there's this hope, and then the heaviness is actually activated in a way that I know that beyond sadness and disappointment, there was anger. And you saw it in the streets in the next few days. You saw people finally going, enough. Like, we are being treated like second-class citizens. Enough. We're living in a time where the world is getting smaller because we can connect on second devices and through the internet and on social media, and we can tell our stories in a way in which this type of discrimination shouldn't exist. And especially in this country. So to tell you how we became plaintiffs, we were active, and Jeff was trying to get me to watch this video from the National Organization of Marriage for Marriage by Maggie Gallagher, who was running it at the time. Maggie.
I'm laughing because I'm pretty good friends with Fred Karger, who you may know.
Yeah.
And all of him, all those characters, and he always, it's just funny because he still talks about people like Maggie Gallagher and Brian Brown and all these weirdos who were running these organizations.
Hey,
they're all really weird, like really weird, creepy, like strange people. But they were like, I think they were both part of NOM, I think, right?
The National Organization. Yeah. And to be honest with you, like the entitlement and the righteousness that came, that's what I think. But you say that we're weird. There's some weird stories for sure. And what we witnessed in person from Maggie Gallagher was also like very just interesting in terms of the righteousness and the expectation that second-class citizenry in this country is like acceptable, right? And so maybe Maggie and Kim Davis are hanging out someplace right now, having a glass of Chardonnay. So ultimately,
I can see it, which is what.
Right. I don't want. I mean,
And then Brian too. She hadn't recently passed away, but anyway, not to speak ill of the dead. But still.
Wait, who did?
Anita Bryant.
Oh, Anita Bryant. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I thought she. I mean, anyway.
She's. They were descendants of her in some way, shape, or form. But the National Organization for Marriage put out this awful commercial called "The Gathering Store," and it was. And Jeff was getting like, he was adamant that I watch this because I think he knew what my reaction would be. And I fought it for a minute, and then I finally sat and watched it, and I literally stood up. I remember the moment where I stood up and went, "That's it. That's it. That's absolutely it. We can't do this any longer." And so we decided to do a response video, and there were a lot of very good, very funny parodies of this commercial out there with some star-studded. Like people got together to be like, "This is ridiculous," and it was, still is. But we wanted to do one that was almost shot for shot. That was people telling their true stories. So we gathered our friends. We talked to friends that were in the entertainment industry. We talked to friends that were in clergy. We talked to friends with families that were, of LGBTQ plus people. And 3 days later, we all gathered, like 40 of us gathered in a studio in Burbank here, and we shot this little video. And everyone did it for free, and it felt good. And we popped it onto YouTube, and in 2009, 250,000 views overnight, and then being translated into other languages in other countries for viewership.
Wow.
Was like,
I don't think I knew about this part of the story.
Yeah,
Is what gave you guys visibility initially, and that was what.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So a series of like coincidences, if you would say. So we put this up. I get a call from CNN. We'd like to, y'all are activists. We're like, we're accidental activists. We just wanted to speak out about this. I did an interview. It got the attention of like Lambda and other, places like, okay, who are these guys? And funny enough, the most coincidental part, another little insider story for you is a couple that stepped in at the last minute to replace a couple that had a family emergency to not be in video. They went to a barbecue that same day that they were filming, and they were a little late to the barbecue, and a gentleman asked them like, "Hey, where were you? Like, why are you late?" And this gentleman happened to be Chad Griffin.
What? That is so insane.
Yes. And so he was like, "Wait, you did
So you guys weren't, I mean, not to jump the gun, but you guys, did you guys know any of the people involved with AFER at all? Like Lance Black or Rob Reiner or any of those people? No?
AFER was just forming,
Wow.
with Rob and Michelle Reiner wrote the first check to fund the organization, and there was this search for plaintiffs, and it was very, very hush hush. They really wanted to keep it quiet until they could figure out and get over it. I think we came on board before David Boies did. I think we came on board when it was Ted Olson
only, and someone else, I think.
and there were a couple other people that they were considering for Ted's co-counsel, and there were some dynamics at play, and I think it's in Ted and David's book, and then ultimately David came on board. It's a wild series of events that, I mean, even if I told you how this couple got involved was such a random moment of someone overhearing my conversation. It was almost like I told Jeff, it's like sometimes you just gotta trust like that, whatever you want to call it, the energy, the universe, your deity, whatever you believe in,
Absolutely.
that it's leading you in the direction of something. And so Chad asked, and then the next thing you know, we get a phone call. Would you like to be spokespeople to help educate on marriage equality? Of course we want to do this. And then it was like, well, how do you feel about it on a federal level? And I think we were both adamant, like we should be protected under the US Constitution. And so maybe that's the, kind of bulletproof way of figuring this out. And they were like, we're glad that you said that. And it just aligned. And I mean, trust me, it was a process. It was a very deep, intensive process.
And quick.
Of consideration on both sides, because initially we were told this was going to be briefs only, no testimony, no showing up in court, like to maybe a court appearance for a brief, and then it would just be briefs all the way to the Supreme Court if it gets there. And that was also a series of random situations that got us there. But that's how we got involved. It's just putting energy out there.
Was it a call for after all the media visibility you guys got, the CNN and the video online? Who was the call, or how did the American Foundation for Equal Rights reach out to you guys? And
Was Christina? That was so Chad Griffin had a political consulting company with his partner Christina Shockey,
right?
And they were the ones who were working on forming AFER with the Reiners. And Christina is the one that reached out and called Paul and asked if we would come downtown for a meeting at a law firm. This happened to be Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher.
Yeah. We walk into a room, there's a 30-foot marble table. We're like,
What's going on here?
what exactly is happening?
They needed to keep it really hush hush because they really, I mean, even once we came on board, I mean, they didn't announce. They were waiting specifically for the California Supreme Court's ruling on Prop 8.
Right. I remember they tried to challenge Prop 8 legally, and then when the California Supreme Court upheld it,
Yeah.
that was when they said, okay, now we need to file a legal challenge.
And
right?
that was like Memorial Day weekend, and it was
federal challenge versus
and it was
state.
the Friday, and we had a lawyer there with a court challenge in his hand and ready, and right before the window closed for the weekend, he filed it because then we knew there would be a long weekend, and then we had our press conference on Tuesday, and again, another little random. It's a random draw on who you get from a judge, and we got a Reagan appointee who just happened to be gay.
Right. Right. Well, not in not that there's anything sketchy or bad or negative about it, but that part of it didn't come to pass or come out until later on, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy that he was a Reagan appointee who there's so many parts of this, but like I remember how I was in 2010, I was there at the rally when they first struck down Prop 8. We'll get to that. There's so many elements to this, but in 2010, but it's funny you bring up the whole part about how long of a process it was and how involved you guys became, because it wasn't just briefings. And not only was it not just legal briefings with the court, but yes, the Reagan judge who struck it down initially on the district court level, that decision happened in 2010.
Yeah.
And I was there in West Hollywood Park with you guys, with Lance Black, there was like a rally basically celebrating the decision. But the actual final decision where it went into effect, because there were several appeals and went up and continued, didn't happen for another 3 years. So you guys ended up being like very prominent, very visible part of this ongoing legal case for basically 5 years of your lives.
Yeah, just about.
Just the fact that you didn't, there was no way really to know how it was going to play out. But I can only imagine for you guys, what was that media scrutiny like as a couple, having been before that, private citizens?
I think, once you understand the calling, you go through this process of, oh no, like what can happen, right? There's this weight of responsibility, one.
And being aware that it's not just media scrutiny, it's history too.
And to be honest with you, our lawsuit really hurdled many organizations' ideas and plans of how a lawsuit or the efforts to gain marriage equality could happen over time. There was this kind of long play
Incrementalism.
Yeah, I mean, yes, incrementalism at best. But to everyone else, it was the reality of how you get there, right? This was the business plan, if you will, or and so our lawsuit really hurdled over these ideas of taking time and incrementally getting there, and said, no, we have a Supreme Court in which this could potentially land in our favor. Still a challenge, but at least, there was a temperature check there that I think was working. And we had this momentum based in public awareness of what was happening as well. So now this was a vehicle to discussing equal rights, regardless if it was about marriage or whatever. Now people this is at the forefront of people's conversations and their debates about what it means to be an American, what it means to have equal rights, what it means to be LGBTQ plus in this country. And it started this discourse. Now, mind you, that was the benefit, the silver lining of all of it. But at first, a lot of the LGBTQ organizations were not happy about it. We were demonized, honestly, like not to be dramatic, but literally people at LGBTQ events coming up to us and saying, you're troublemakers. You're setting us back. How dare you? And we're like, hey, we're on the same team. And we just feel like we've got a call to be a part of something that we believe could help us. And even in the times that it was a little dark and scary, Jeff said something to me profound that he says to this day. And when I had doubt and I came home from work and people were calling my work and saying, you should fire him because he is, this or that. I came home and I was like, I'm exhausted and I'm scared. And we had literal threats delivered to our door, hand delivered to our mailbox. So you're exposed in this way that is tremendous. It's different. It's frightening. So then I came home one night, and I'll let Jeff tell you, because I thought it was a really beautiful transition from fear to action.
Well, I just said to him, I said, at the end of the day, we can go to our graves saying at least we did something and tried to do something and didn't just stand for or just settle for being second-class citizens. We just weren't going to do it.
Right.
And if we felt like, we always felt like we were on the right side of history, on the right side of the law. It was just a matter of would the legal system and the justice system play out in our favor. And, we really felt, Ted Olson and David Boies always told us that they're not giving up on any Supreme Court justice, but they were really arguing to one justice, and that was Justice Kennedy.
Well, I mean, it occurred to me earlier during part of our conversation that, I mean, of course, a lot of people, you guys are, well-known figures within the community. However, it is incredible when you stop to think how many people, as a result of that decision, I mean, just within California alone, I don't even know the exact number, but the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, certainly millions across the country, and future generations of people that, because of your involvement in that case, it sort of makes you go, it kind of blows your mind, the enormity of that, and that you guys can walk down the street and, there are people who, many of whom do know who you guys are, but the point is, like, your personal involvement and the impact that you made, in this case made, is going to reverberate for people you'll never even meet or never even, it kind of just blows your mind when you think about it that way. But I wanted to ask you, you guys mentioned Ted Olson and David Boies, the two lawyers who argued Bush v. Gore against each other, Ted Bush, Boies for Gore. Did you guys know who they were? And also, what was it like working for them? Were you surprised that they both ended up taking up the case? Certainly Ted Olson, who up to that point, I think he works in the Reagan administration, I'm pretty sure. And
He's a solicitor.
Was a super conservative. So what was that? What is it like working with them? And also, were you guys just surprised and amazed that you had the chance, or that they were working with you guys on this?
Well, we knew who they were, obviously, from Bush v. Gore, and as Rob Reiner used to always say, Ted Olson, kept him in bed for 3 days after the election because of the Bush v. Gore stuff. But and
that's a good point. I can only imagine, because knowing, and I don't know Rob, I met him, but he's so passionate about,
very much so.
I can only imagine what that first meeting must have been like for the two of them.
I think what was most important to us was the balance of the Republican versus Democrat, right? And marriage equality was such a divisive issue, and
especially then.
And it still is, and it's predominantly divided amongst party lines. So this really helps strip away the political part of it, and we were able to focus on changing hearts and minds. And, the two of them, they were. I never felt like a client, and I don't know. I know I can speak for Paul saying the same. I just always felt like they were parental to us, and they genuinely cared about this issue so much that, I mean, I'll let Paul tell you the story of after our first argument in court with Ted, just always felt very safe and felt very much like they cared about this issue more than anything they've ever done in their lives.
And not only that, they were like best friends. They traveled the world together. They did bike tours together. They drank expensive wine together. And so not only were they an example of how you can disagree on some fundamental things, but when it came down to humanity and equal rights and equal protection, there was no divide whatsoever. Jeff was referring to the stories of the day that we were in court, and Judge Von Walker said, well, of course this isn't going to be briefs. We're going to hear testimony. And we were like, that was not what we did not expect this at all. And it's a terrifying moment.
Yeah.
Now, what you've said that is written, right?
Right.
You need to now take an oath before the world and stand up for everything that you believe in and who you are. When normally in court, you have to be an expert in a field or a study. And this is,
I remember I read I mean, not to like make it about me or whatever, but I mean, how long did the district court trial go? Or not trial, but what would the correct term be? Hearing? How long did that go on for?
March and April, and then there was a break. Then there were closing arguments in June, and then the judge decided August 4th.
yeah.
All right. What's crazy is, I can only imagine for you guys, because from what I remember reading the transcripts, and in addition to having experts, I mean, what's kind of crazy is, a lot of people may not know this, that it was almost like an evidentiary trial where they explored. It was such a far, like, in a way, it was even more of a far-reaching or bigger debate than even when it went up to the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Because there were so many layers to trying to talk about the scientific evidence of, sexuality being an immutable characteristic. And I mean, it was pretty unbelievable that like this, it was almost like the monkey trial, like the Scopes trial.
Right.
Like, in terms of, like, you were talking about big stuff and bringing in scientists and psychologists, and it wasn't just about the right to marry. It was about all the questions from that, like, well, if being gay isn't an immutable characteristic, then does that mean that there can be that there could be a basis? You know what I mean? It's just I just remember being like, wow. And so, but then for you guys to testify and then be cross-examined, right? By were you guys?
Well, he was. I wasn't. He was the only one.
I was the only one that got cross-examined. So, but you make a very good point. This also exemplifies this idea that it wasn't just about marriage. It was about humanity. It was truly an equality-based case, and that the ruling, that book that came out of that federal court, is now this record of this evidentiary, like you said, process to humanize an idea that was demonized by people through either their religion or however they decided to think that they could fight this idea of equality. So on that day that we found out, I mean, look, testifying was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. And but when we found out about it, Ted threw his arms around us, literally threw his arms around us, said, this is the most important thing I've ever done. So it washed away anything that we would have disagreed on so many other things. But at that moment, I was like, okay, well, we have a job to do. And so we're going to go through this respectfully and with love to get us there. And to answer your question about testifying and being cross-examined, it is an interesting thing to be examined to make sure that you're credible as to who you say you are and how you love. It's ridiculous. It actually has no legitimacy. So when these questions were coming, you're like, this is, first of all, you would think it's easy. I was going to answer honestly, this is who I am as a person. But I think one of my more like moments that I remember most is you're asking me questions as if I'm an expert in a field or education or, propaganda or campaigning. And I'm not. I'm just a human being who's living my life. And this is my expertise, is that I am telling you that these things are discriminatory and they're holding us back and building a fence around us as Americans that we cannot access things that other can, and you have to legitimately come forth. And you're in a court of law. If you don't have a legitimate reason, then you will be thrown out of the court of law. And effectively, that's what happened in the end.
Absolutely. Well, what's crazy is, the trial took place 2010, and then the final decision, there were several levels of appeal.
Right.
It went finally in 2013 up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's I like, even though I didn't go to law school, I'm not great. I was never great in school. I took pride in the fact that I out of pure passion, like, read all the briefings and transcripts and understood the whole concept of standing in court and all that. I won't get into that for the purposes of this podcast. It would be not to anyway. But in the end, after a series of appeals, the U.S. Supreme Court essentially sided with allowed same-sex marriage, the district court ruling in 2010, to go into effect in California.
Correct.
After a 3-year delay, because when the district court ruled in favor of you guys, they put a stay, or he put a stay on the decision pending final appeal. What was that like after 3 years? And maybe, since we talked about it a little earlier, you can talk a little about the day of the decision and the fact that day then coincided with your own marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, the emotions and the both personal and historic element of that day just must have been beyond overwhelming.
I'll add one layer before I'll let Jeff answer about the day of. And the anniversary of Stonewall is our wedding day. So it gives me chills.
That feels like synchro destiny in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But we would be remiss if we didn't say that also on that day was the Windsor decision, which struck down the Defense of Marriage Act. So that
right.
In tandem with our case, it really was just a huge step forward for our community.
I should remember this,
So
but was the exact vote on the Supreme Court? Like, did you guys really? Was there any sense of how it was going to go down, or do you really not know?
If you look at our ruling and who was in favor of us and who wasn't, it wouldn't be who you'd think, because ours was decided on standing.
Right.
So we lost the liberal justices, right? So they wanted, because they wanted to go all the way, right? They wanted to strike down any marriage bans. But they, typically what the Supreme Court does is they try to take the narrowest ruling, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. But at the same time, on that day, striking down the Defense of Marriage Act really propelled, when Judge Walker, who was the federal district judge, when he decided that case in August of 2010, within days, you had lawsuits popping up in all states across the country that had bans they were leveraging his decision to file the lawsuit. So we knew it was just a matter of time before all of these laws would be struck down. And we ended up being the 13th state in the union to have marriage equality. Our co-plaintiff, Sandy Sear, always likes to say California was behind Iowa. She's born and raised in Iowa, and Iowa had marriage equality before California. So great day. We flew back that day. We didn't have Ted with us that day. He was doing another argument, but we had David. But then we met Ted back in Los Angeles and had a great celebration. And 2 days later, we were married by the mayor.
Yeah, and by that point, 37 states had marriage equality. So to Jeff's point, a momentum had happened. A ruling was supporting this, and lawsuits were being decided based on it. So we had this soaring messaging through law and protection. Not only that, but through our stories, and people were getting married, and these beautiful images were. It was just like this is kind of amazing, almost like Shakespearean thing, right? I've figured it out. It was just poetic in its own way. But yeah, as to Jeff's point, it was such a tremendous. I think the most profound thing that we don't normally talk about is when the Supreme Court closes, they close. I mean, they shove you out those doors. They're like, you can't hang out in the lobby. Like, literally, we were being handled out the doors, and we just wanted to be together. So it was like, okay, where's our team and where's everybody? And we kind of like walked out those steps. We took that historic photograph that, we just all standing there. And then we walked down to the landing and we stopped, Chris, Sandy, Jeff, and myself. And I said, let's just take a moment. This is remarkable. And I think that we should stand here for just a moment, regardless of, security or whatever, or media waiting. And we took 60 seconds. It must have been a minute or so just to look out to the crowd and to feel, and this is going to sound like a little heady, but to feel the history of the movement, to feel like this power and to hear thousands of people chanting and cheering and loving. It was this remarkable affirmation that every effort matters.
There were people in the crowd that weren't in the crowd, and those were Harvey Milk, Barry Rustin. Like those are people that were in the crowd that were cheering us, but they were cheering from above. But we stood on their shoulders, and it's unfortunately been much more of a marathon in our community than a sprint. But I feel like marriage equality tended to be a little bit more of a sprint from 2010 on.
Well, it's true that in the meantime, between the district court decision when the Supreme Court finally allowed that decision to go into effect and allowed gay marriage in California, a bunch of other states had legalized it. It's kind of crazy when you look back and you go, California was, well, it's both sad that California didn't happen until 36 other states had already done it. However, it could also be argued that California was what your case, arguably, probably what gave the U.S. Supreme Court 2 years later the momentum it needed and the sort of the permission politically, culturally it needed to go that next final step. Because along with like New York, California, New York, the two largest, most populous states in the union, without California, if California hadn't legalized gay marriage, the Supreme Court might be like, well, we're not quite there yet. But so in 2013, your decision, the California legalizes it. And in 2015 is when Obergefell v. Hodges takes place, which was the decision where those last 13 states, it finally became a nationwide decision. What was that day like, knowing the role that you guys had played and as you said, it was a sort of going back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the final sort of, at least in that moment, it felt like the final. We'll get to what's happening now, but what at the time felt like the final culmination. What was it like?
I just think that the momentum had built so much on our side, and I think that from the very very foundation of our lawsuit and the findings of fact, and it can get really dense legally, but I think that the public opinion had also shifted. By the time when we filed our lawsuit, it was 40-60 against us in May of 2009. By the time we won in June of 2013, it was 60-40. It had swapped. It was 60-40 in our favor. And by the time it got to 2015, it was even further. And today we're sitting at about 70% support marriage equality. So I think it was just, I think the Supreme Court knew it was time. Thank God Justice Kennedy was still on the court, and he wrote very eloquent opinion.
One vote changed not just history, but so many people's lives. Forever.
And if you look at the makeup of the court now, in 2009, when they told us that we were crazy, the court was not on our side. If we had waited, because Hillary was going to win, if we had waited, we would have lost.
That's such a good point. Just thank God it happened in 2015 versus 2019 or I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. That the timing actually ended up being perfect. Both the makeup of the court, the cultural and political conditions. It's actually kind of incredible when you think about that. Wow. That leads me to my point about where we're at now, because a decade now has taken place or has gone by since since marriage equality was legalized nationwide, and yet something that at least to me it seemed at the time was sort of now it's history, like it's behind us now. It's we're moving forward. obviously, we're living in a very different time now. And what I think a lot of people thought, I think a lot of people thought that progress just went in a straight line, and that, at least in America, that maybe there was backsliding in other countries, but that if gay marriage and LGBTQ plus rights in general were on this forward trajectory, that was just now the way it was. But we've seen in so many ways this backsliding take place, and thankfully, just the other day, we saw that an appeal that was sent up to the Supreme Court by Kim Davis, who was the clerk in Kentucky who tried to resist performing same-sex marriages in Kentucky in 2015. She tried 10 years later, given the new conservative makeup of the court, to try to have the Supreme Court take up an appeal and see if they would be willing to overturn same-sex marriage. The court declined her specific appeal. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that maybe this is just the Supreme Court waiting for the right case? Like, as not only on a personal level as a married same-sex couple, but how do you feel about the how secure we are in terms of our rights and marriage rights as a community, and whether the Supreme Court might take up the case of the issue again?
Well, this is where we might have a little disagreement at this table, but I do want to say that in the time of the ruling until Kim Davis's case, let's not forget that in 2022, President Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which helped codify interracial marriage and marriage equality. Doesn't mean that the court wouldn't say that that's an unconstitutional law. I think in general, I don't feel there is much of an appetite from Justice Roberts or even Justice Amy Coney Barrett to overturn it. She has come out and said, what do you do? Like, how do you unwind all of these marriages? Yeah, I have my own opinions on Chief Justice Roberts. But when he retires, he is potentially leaving a legacy of a court that has just taken America backwards, whether it's with abortion, voting rights, so many different things. I think he's got to start thinking legacy now as well.
I mean, that's the
they could be waiting.
It's true though. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but to your point, it's like you kind of go, like, there's conflicting things. It's like, on the one hand, he's a conservative, so is it like, but he doesn't seem like a conservative in the way that like a Alito or a Thomas is. So it's like, what does he want his legacy to be? Because if his legacy really is that he wants to be this person or Chief Justice who protected the integrity of the court, he's doing a really shitty job.
Really?
And I think that most people, even conservatives in a lot of cases, but he's basically hated by everybody now, because the conservatives hate him because they don't think he's conservative enough. The liberals hate him so it's like, what does he want his legacy to be? Because at this point, it ain't looking that great, unless you're right, unless maybe part of the decision to not take up Kim Davis's case was maybe saying, if we overturn marriage equality, that's going to be the final. Even if he did initially vote against gay marriage back in 2015, maybe he's in his head, he's saying, that would really put knowing public sentiment now, maybe he was saying that'll put, I don't need that. Like, we'll leave that one.
Keep in mind, he had to have him and Amy Coney Barrett were likely no votes on Kim Davis, as were Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson. But you only need 4 justices to accept a case, so we still could be in trouble down the line. But I think if they ultimately end up taking some kind of case, I think Justice Roberts would make sure he's in the majority, even if it's not on our side, because he can then decide who writes the opinion, and they could write it very narrowly, and it could be something where Kim Davis gets some type of exemption, that type of case. But I don't think there's an appetite to overturn it. I'm sorry.
And
Dominating the conversation here.
All good. That's all good. I mean, I won't drag that part of it out, but I will just say this one quick thing. We do agree on a few things. I pay attention to the language. There's not an endorsement of marriage equality. There is a loophole. There is a diversion or a, how do we unwind marriages? That's not a, I believe in the sanctity of marriage for all people. So it's really important to understand that there's a long game happening as well. And,
well, because I feel like there was not. I mean, I know we're we could go on for hours, but I feel like I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the U.S. Supreme Court, there were at least one or two, if not three, cases on the abortion issue that they declined to take until Dobbs, where they finally said, "Okay, this is the one." So,
and they had also chipped away at Roe v. Wade a little bit over the years.
Yeah. And there was that decision in Texas where they allowed civil liability for women who but Jeff, a lot of the points you just made, because I'm Paul, not that you've really had a chance to express, but I mean, I get the gist of why it sounds like, I think I know what you're saying, why you're a little more worried perhaps about. But Jeff, you made some good points. I hope you're right. I really hope that they're smart enough, and that Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, they're smart enough to hold the line. But we'll see. I guess that's the question. That's the question mark remains, or the question remains, and the answer remains to be seen in the future. But again, so much more I could ask you, and I could talk to you guys literally for hours. But in general, sort of as a wrap up, how do you feel, not just on the issue of marriage, but just on the issue of LGBTQ rights, the state of the country at the moment? And as people who have been involved and have made a massive impact, what advice would you give people watching this, considering the state of our country right now, about how they might be able to make a difference and make an impact?
Right. It's a really good question. And I think the best way that I think we can encapsulate the answer is every effort matters. Every single one. And the only thing that gets in the way of our moving forward is apathy or expectation. Or I won't make a difference because. And you have to think, I think, of the people who are still in situations in which they cannot live authentically. That could be the game-changing, the thought leader in a way that we can advance and overcome these times that we're in right now, because it's not like these times are unique. This feels like an avalanche, but we have been through points in history, cyclically, in which we have come together and we have supported each other, and we have fought with either our voices, our dollars, our votes, our fists, our legal, the legal system. What you're doing right now, interviewing two guys that did this thing so many years ago, is really the way of stitching together the history and inspiration. We are two gentlemen that live in Burbank, California, and that stood up off the couch and said, "This is enough." And the next thing you know, 5 years later, we're standing on the steps of the Supreme Court. And a few years after that, our nieces and nephews are cracking open their history and sociology books, and they're doing reports on us. So this all being said, we are living in times that are very challenging. And I think part of the plan is to push us back into the closet, to push us back down under the idea of dignity and respect and full recognition. And every day that you stand up and you live authentically, every day that you tell your story, every day that you get an opportunity like this one to exercise your freedom of saying, every single time that you do that, you're potentially changing the course of history. And that could be in your home, in your school, in your job, wherever, or it could be on the stage of the Supreme Court. That can be you. So the idea is, don't dim your light because someone else feels like they have their hand on the switch. The idea is to stay authentic and to stay loud and to stay connected and to build your network. And by doing so, you can change the world.
Perfectly said. Literally, seriously. I continue to be so inspired by you guys and grateful, and I'm really, really, really grateful and happy that we could talk today. And
Sure
so
thing.
many, and besides just the valuable advice and insights for people, and just really enjoyable getting to. I just remembering all these things because I'm 33, but I started getting involved in activism when I was 18, and just remembering all these little details. And it's so true because it's important to remember all the steps that it took to get to this point, especially now because there are so many new challenges and new attempts to try to take us back.
Sure.
We can't forget the successes, and we can't remember the people who were a big part of helping to bring us where we are. So thank you so much to you both. And again, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
It's always humbling and inspiring at the same time because, we get to connect. And now I will say thank you for having us, but when are we having dinner? When are we having lunch?
I swear I was just envisioning us getting to actually sit down, and I would love that. I'd really love that. So
Let's make it happen.
I'll text you guys after this podcast, and we'll figure
Sounds
something
good.
out.
We'll make it happen.
Happy
Awesome.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks,
Thank
Duke.
you as well.
Thank you for joining me today on Duke's Download. This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by me, Duke Mason, and produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig. Original music composed by Nell Balaban. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps others to discover the show. I'd love to stay connected with you, so join the conversation by following me at James Duke Mason on Instagram and X, or by emailing me at questions@dukesdownload.com.